Bing bong.
Hello everybody and welcome to Deep Dive Zone, a Sonic the Hedgehog rewatch podcast for fans of all shapes and sizes. I'm your host Devin, and as with last episode, for our second part of our 6-week journey through Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, you're going to be hearing a little bit of inconsistencies in the sound quality between the three of us, and you're going to hear that Bruce is not present for some of the episodes because he didn't want to watch them, and frankly, I don't blame him for some of them. So if things seem a little off, that's why. With all that said, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Episode 12, Birth of a Salesman. An energetic salesman named Wes Weasley sells Robotnik numerous gadgets to help Scratch and Grounder capture Sonic. However, Robotnik later comes to regret it when Weasley's gadgets keep backfiring. So, I was considering whether I should put this on Bruce's list of episodes for him to watch, because Wes Weasley becomes a frequent recurring character throughout the show, but I realized that I dislike him too much, and the episodes that he's in are not on the list anyway, so I didn't. And the other thing that I want to note is that the gadgets do not keep backfiring, they're just really bad at using them.
Yeah, that's my first note. Obvious mistakes are obvious, but Robotnik should not entrust the devices with Scratch and Grounder. He actually shouldn't entrust, practically anything with Scratch and Grounder. He should just smash them. But this is the episode where he says that he's just too sentimental to not rebuild them every time, which is kind of weird. Although my headcanon is that he can't admit that his robots that were supposed to be the ultimate hedgehog hunters are failures.
Why does Robotnik need to buy somebody else's inventions?
I mean, I think the implication is that Weasley is just a really good salesman and talked him into it.
Who's building them, though, is my question. Because I assume that he didn't make those all himself, otherwise how does he have an intellect on par with Robotnik?
Oh, no, I mean, he's a representative for an agency. I don't remember what it was. It's some stupid acronym, but
It would be funny if that was like Von Schlemmer or Warpnik who made them, and he's just the one selling them.
Yeah, that would be an interesting bit of continuity there, but a bit beyond what this show would attempt, I think. But yeah, that is definitely a weird point that Robotnik buys inventions. Although, speaking of when he's trying to sell him on, the disintegrator ray or whatever, Robotnik outright states, I don't want to, get rid of Sonic. I want to imprison them so I can gloat at them. So this solidifies what I already observed, that, they want to humiliate Sonic, basically.
Yeah. The pride is always more important than the actual goal itself.
Yep.
Which that is the case with pretty much every version of Robotnik, so.
Indeed. And so that makes sense why Robotnik wouldn't actually try to outright eliminate Sonic. But what doesn't make sense, and really makes me confused, is why Sonic uses all the inventions at the end to completely annihilate Robotnik, but then chooses to instead just leave him all mixed up with Scratch and Grounder and gives them an out on purpose and just runs away. And I'm like, aren't you freedom fighters or whatever? That's what you said in episode 2. Why didn't you take the opportunity to defeat him? It makes me wonder if Sonic is a flawed hero and is actually enjoying it.
That actually is more plausible than you'd think, but what I was actually going to say is, this is one thing that I will give Sonic Underground credit for. This is spoiling a little bit of our Sonic Underground episodes coming up, but in that show, Robotnik gets all of his money and funding from the Mobian aristocracy, and I assume it's because, an authoritarian ruler is better than being overtaken by the proles. And so even when the heroes beat him in that show, he's still not actually removed from power. So if they had done something like that for this, it would accidentally be a somewhat prescient, political commentary, but it's not.
Yeah, no, he's not even really in charge in this one. He's just, he has a big old fortress and an army of robots, but he doesn't actually have much control.
He says that he's in charge a lot of times, and sometimes people agree.
Yeah, exactly. My last random note is that just a bit of lore that doesn't really make any difference, but apparently episodes 1 through 12 take place over the course of 4 months. I don't know how much of a good timeline I could make beyond that, but Scratch mentions that at one point.
I forgot about that, but that's interesting. We'll put a pin in that, because if we see some other measure of time, it'll be how does that make sense, or something like that.
Yeah, he said they were built 4 months ago. That's where I got that from.
All right.
But yeah.
Episode 13, Best Hedgehog. Sonic and Tails rescue Lucas, Robotnik's first prisoner, and attempt to reunite him with his girlfriend, Lucinda. However, Robotnik is also in love with Lucinda and pursues Lucas. So, he's just had this guy locked up since high school and nobody knew about it?
I mean, yeah, I guess. There are a lot of plot points that, like, this didn't come up until now, really. But yeah.
Also, this is a blatant continuity mistake. I hope somebody got fired for this blunder. It says that Lucas is his first prisoner, but in a later episode, Robotnik said that he was king of the daycare as a toddler and that he kidnapped his babysitter. So which is it, Adventures of Sonic? I thought you were trying to build a logically consistent universe here.
Oh, no. See, I was about to praise this episode because it picked up on the fact that Robotnik is lonely. But you're right, it loses all points now. Although I will still treat it as if it is consistent, or at least as consistent as I can force it to be. Because here I was like, okay, so if it's been 30 years since they imprisoned their school rival, then Robotnik has got to be in their 40s or 50s. So I can guess its age then.
Yeah, and that's probably pretty fitting. I think in the comics they write Robotnik as being like late 40s, mid 50s, something like that. Although there is an old art from Sonic 1 of Robotnik for that says like he was born in the 40s, and that would put him, in his 40s or 50s in Sonic 1, but then that was 30 years ago, so it's probably different now.
Oh, yeah, well, but then the actual passage of time and then how they just kind of pick ages, like, it doesn't make any sense given what goes on. But yeah, I don't know. I was only trying to guess it in the context of this one canon, which is probably not even consistent. What's weird, though, is that, speaking of timelines and stuff, Tails recognizes the rotten egg bomb that Robotnik uses as if he's used it before, which is funny to me that it's like a recurring weapon.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I guess I just thought that I had missed something in a previous episode or something there, but I don't think so.
No, it's just a callback to something that we didn't see, I guess. And of course, this whole thing is a callback as it goes on to Robotnik's past. I really like the flashbacks where first from Lucas's point of view, where Robotnik is about what you'd expect, and then Robotnik's point of view when he looks all like handsome and well dressed. I like that. It's funny.
Yeah.
So this series leans kind of between Robotnik is cartoonishly evil, and that's how they're not really meant to be, too serious and scary, and then also that maybe he is like evil, but he's also pathetic, and this episode definitely leans into that a lot, because he was like aware of Lucinda for 30 years, but never ever made a move, because he knew where she was in the jungle or whatever, until he's about to run out of time because Lucas is freed from prison.
The thing is that there are people like that who just never get over a crush from high school, but it's weird to say that you're in love with somebody and then also do nothing even though there's nothing specific stop, because I don't remember, does she actually know that he kidnapped Lucas?
I mean, I'd be surprised if she didn't, but I don't think they say that she does outright.
I think I guess it's implied by the fact that she has his picture up in her classroom just to throw darts at, but if they never say it, then it's like, because if she knew, then like of course he wouldn't go after her, because it would be like a really weird creepy thing where, oh, I know that she'll never love me because I'm a gigantic fucking asshole, but I have to have her anyway or whatever. But instead it's just weird. Yeah,
luckily when they bring this trait up again, it becomes less weird and creepy and more comical. We'll get there, but yeah, that's the end of my notes for this.
Episode 14, The Robotnik Express. En route to stop a train of explosives from arriving at Robotnik's munition factory, Sonic and Tails must deal with a duo of bears named Big Grizz and Big Mike after Scratch and Grounder tell them that Sonic and Tails are the enemies. So this is one of the most annoying episodes of the show, and it's just because they keep doing the stupid "da bears" joke over and over. It was not even that funny on Saturday Night Live.
Thank you. I'm glad that you also found that very annoying. My first note for this episode is, okay, now the episodes are starting to bleed together, because this is when I started to actually get annoyed with the show. I was fairly nostalgic up until this point. Now I'm getting annoyed with it. Yeah, this episode, there's not really a whole lot to it. A few gags every now and then, I guess, that kind of got me. I don't know if this was even on purpose. I think they just started the music early. But there's a bit where Scratch and Grounder are like fighting over the controls on the train, and they start the like trouble/fight music playing when they're fighting each other, not when Sonic is. And so I'm like, is that like a meta joke? Like, oh, now our brave heroes Scratch and Grounder are in trouble as they fight each other. Like, I like that.
That'd be good. I literally have no notes for this episode other than the one joke it has being really not funny.
Yeah, that's really not a funny joke. This is where I wondered if Scratch and Grounder really are getting smarter, because they were surprisingly competent in being able to capture Sonic briefly, and then they're even able to trick Da Bears into joining them. But no, once again, it's just an outlier, unfortunately. They're just able to be smart sometimes when the plot decides it. A lot of the concepts in the show, if they were done more seriously, would actually be pretty dark. Robotnik is stockpiling bombs that he's going to use to like bomb all the rebels or something, I think he says, which is like pretty serious actually, but obviously done very comically.
Yeah, I mean, when it's weird because like I don't think even Sad AM went that far, because Robotnik could never find the village in that show.
Right, that's true. Oh, okay. There's a bit of irony here, which is that Sonic is too good to throw even his enemies into a bunch of cacti, because they'll get like, poked a bunch, but he has no problem with getting them run over by a train.
Yep. You could definitely die from falling into a lot of cacti in the real world at a certain, distance and level and amount of them, but they would not kill you nearly as fast as getting hit by a train.
It's just cartoon logic at its finest anyway. But yeah, that sums up this episode, I suppose.
Episode 15, Two Tall Tales. Robotnik takes Professor von Schlemmer hostage and uses his growth machine to try and enlarge himself. However, the machine backfires and enlarges Tails instead in nearby Wienerville. Robotnik tricks the citizens into thinking that Sonic is the villain, while Robotnik is the hero planning to save the city from Tails. Sonic must keep the famished Tails from getting into more danger and return him to normal size. This is a friggin' trip of an episode, man. Why are they hot dog people?
Yeah, living sausages that serve sausages. Did the writers not think that would come off as cannibalistic?
I think they just gave up for this one.
This is a weird one, indeed. It's still funny at times, though. There's a bit where it's like, Sonic is like, wait, Tails, why are you getting taller? And then Tails is like, oh yeah, I am, all right. And like literally 2 seconds later, he's like, I don't like this anymore. And I'm like, well, that's quite a flip. It's just the way the tone comes off. I don't know.
Growth hormones are a bitch.
But he just gets super lazy and pathetic, like a real teenager, because Tails is in like such a good position in this episode, but he doesn't take advantage of it at all. He just sort of sits around and does nothing, even as Robotnik is going to like freeze him or something. He's actually pretty good for most of the series, but not in this one episode for some reason.
Yeah, no, I think other than Robotnik, who just Long John Baldry is just a joy constantly. But Tails is probably the best character in this show, just because Sonic can be a little much sometimes.
I definitely agree with that.
Another note I have here is, why does, I think it's Von Schlemmer when he's kidnapped, why does he get to suggest his own torture?
That was one of my notes too. My point was actually, why does he suggest getting tortured? He's lucky he's in a cartoon. That would have been really unpleasant if he wasn't.
Instead, it's just kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We got feet tickling, overeating, and expansion all in the same episode. It's like, please, if you're gonna have those things in your show, just pace them out a bit. It starts to feel weird when they're all packed together like that.
Yeah. Let's move on, shall we?
Yeah, anyway, they completely tease me in this episode with the promise of a lizard wizard, and then they skipped past Sonic actually meeting him, which I can only assume meant that they were gonna register a trademark for this character, but then found out that some dudes in Australia did it, and that 25 years later they were gonna start a psych metal band. That's the only reason that I can assume.
That's gotta be it. You're right on the money there.
I don't even know how old Stu McKenzie would have been. He must have been a child when this episode aired, because he's not that many years older than me. Listen to King Gizzard, by the way, if you're watching this. They're a good band. Anyway.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, or an Arnold Schwarzenegger robot, exists in the Adventures of Sonic universe, because Sonic disguises himself as that and says, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger taught him how to bodybuild or something. But
Yeah.
interestingly, this is not the last reference of Schwarzenegger in the show by
It
any
makes me
extent.
wonder if they were foreshadowing a character there, or were like looking back at their previous episodes and like, hey, an Arnold bot. We can milk lots of dated humor out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 16, Tails' New Home. When Sonic decides to find Tails a suitable foster home to ensure his safety, Robotnik finds out and creates a robot fox family who poses Tails' long-lost parents. That's kind of a sad premise for an episode.
It is.
Yeah, this is one of those episodes where it's like, okay, so now the characters get to be out of character because the writers wanted the plot this way. I don't
Right.
for a minute buy that Sonic would try to like abandon Tails to a home.
Yeah, that
Well,
was
this
my
is-
first thought.
Well, and this is already a contradiction right at the start, because Sonic and Tails are arbitrarily separated for Tails to be in danger. But why?
Again, just for the plot.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's annoying, especially since I actually like this episode in other ways, because this is the one episode that tries to have any emotional weight for the characters, just in that Tails is, I guess, an orphan. It's not explicitly stated, but...
Yeah, so this is why I like this episode, because we get the lore about Tails' backstory, because you see how they met Sonic.
Right.
We don't know why they were an orphan or all that, but not every question is answered. You gotta leave some theories left to boil.
And in
But
fairness, the only canon to ever answer the question of who Tails' family is the Archie comics, and it was really disappointing, so...
oh yes, those poor comics. I was surprised though, because this episode introduces that yes, even in Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, their real name is Miles. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. We're getting. It almost felt like a bit of game canon, because I wasn't sure if they'd actually use it here.
Yeah, and it also says that that Tails, like, he doesn't like his real name and he prefers to be called Tails.
Right? Yeah.
I don't quite understand why. I guess it's because it's the only thing that he has from a family that he doesn't know. I suppose that's what implied.
Maybe he just hated that his parents had the gall to name him a pun.
Yeah, miles per hour for those who
Yep.
don't get it yet. I know that a lot of people did not get that pun for like 20 years.
I mean, it took me a while. I didn't get it when I
I
was
mean,
younger.
to be fair, I think. Well, I was gonna say you have to say like almost in a specific way.
Well, because you can say per hour relatively easily without enunciating it that hard.
Right.
Prower is not... Nobody says, miles per hour when they're looking at their dashboard.
I guess, yeah. So you kind of have to like think about it a little bit.
Which, when they introduced, like, DarkTales, in the comics, why did they not call him kilometers?
Oh my gosh.
That's exactly the sort of joke they would pull. Anyway. I wrote in my notes here, I wish the fake parents looked a bit more convincing, but I also understand why they're not, because if there was a kid who was very invested in this plot where Tails gets to find his parents, that would make it super upsetting when both of them fucking explode.
Yeah, everyone in this show is a master of disguise, even though to us the disguises are obvious.
It's not just Sonic, even though he does it by far the most.
We talked about the memes. I love finding the sources of the memes, because this is the episode where Robotnik gives himself a promotion.
I'll have to give myself a promotion!
That was fun. And again, on the topic of Robotnik, just the best. They just do silly things, like where they have like some sort of extended reel back and then go into a high five with one of their robots. That's great. And then also that, they're a mechanical genius, but apparently they can't spell. And so they're like, oh, I will just take over the world, and then everyone has to spell things the way I spell it.
Oh, it's a British
great.
colonialism moment.
Oh my gosh! That's true. Last thing of import, Scratch and Grinder's treacheries show up because Robotnik gets flattened on a rug, and then they're just like, oh, well, I guess we'll just walk away and leave him alone instead of helping him.
My last thing on here is the PSA, for this episode. It's all about trusting your parents unconditionally, which is like... Guys,
Yeah,
I hate to tell you this, but not 100% of parents are trustworthy.
well, it's also probably the worst episode they could have put it on.
Yeah, the episode is
Oh.
about fake parents that are evil.
This would not be
Yeah.
the last time that the Sonic Says segment sends mixed messages with the contrasting with the episode.
Oh, certainly. Episode 7,
Teen.
Over the Hill Hero. When overweight, elderly superhero Captain Rescue bungles in his attempts to help Sonic, he grows tired of his incompetence. Robotnik then uses Captain Rescue to successfully imprison Sonic in an impenetrable force field, and Tails and Captain Rescue must save him. So this is the first episode of this show that I ever saw, because I had a DVD. My parents got me, DVDs of various Sonic shows at different points in my childhood. So I had a DVD of this show, I had a Sonic X DVD, and I had like 2 or 3 different Sonic Underground DVDs. Or there was like a multi-DVD pack or something like that. So this was the first episode I ever saw, and boy was that a confusing place to start, because why is Sonic here helping out this weird old superhero? What is this show about? But it's just another Guy to Help of the Week episode.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess if you saw it in isolation, you might get confused, but I think that would happen with a lot of episodes.
Yeah, but again, it was the first one I saw, so I had no idea.
Makes sense, yeah. Yeah, this episode... Okay, so first of all, let me just say, I don't understand Robotnik's plan. He's like, I'm gonna make a big old force field to cover the planet and, like, push my enemies off the planet with the force field. I don't know how that makes any sense.
I'm thinking as I've heard you said that, and I can't come up with anything.
Okay, good, yeah, there are a few plot holes that I really cannot even think of a silly explanation or any explanation. They're just weird. So that's one. Otherwise, this episode just kind of has a few gags there, here and now that stood out to me. I like when there's a scene transition and Robotnik pulls up the previous scene like a curtain. That is perfectly like cartoon logic, and I love it.
There are certain kinds of absurdity that I do want from this show. It's just not when it gets in the way of things that could have been better.
Right, exactly. Or like when it weaves it into what's already going on as well. In this episode, Robotnik channels their Sonic 3 self as they manipulate Captain Rescue into becoming their ally. And when he's doing that, Captain Rescue is like unsure and has a question mark above his head, and then Robotnik grabs it and like smashes it to pieces, and that's pretty good.
Yeah. There's also a point in here where Robotnik references the twin moons of Mobius, which is one of several references to the world of Sonic the Hedgehog having more than one moon. And I'm only bringing this up because this is one of the little Sonic world details that pisses me off and that fans will talk about for hours, is that in Sonic Adventure 2, of course, half the moon gets destroyed, but then in Shadow the Hedgehog, which is a direct sequel to that game, it's just arbitrarily fixed, and they constantly bend over backwards to be like, oh, you're just seeing the side of the moon that wasn't destroyed, it rotated. But here's the easy explanation, just say it has more than one moon. There's even bits like in Sonic Riders where you can see environments that have more than one moon in them. So it's like, I don't know why they bother. In the Archie comics, it has 100 moons, that's now too many.
What, 100 moons? That's absurd. Well, that's quite some insight. I had the dual moons noted here. I just thought it was an interesting detail, but didn't realize such large significance it has to the greater series. So
it doesn't. It just annoys me.
No, it does. It does. So important. This show reuses ideas from time to time. I was surprised to see that they brought back the giant demolition feet machines from Mama Robotnik's birthday in this episode. And yeah, just sort of little details like that will show up from time to time that are in multiple episodes. I don't know.
It is a funny thing, because a lot of these Monster of the Week shows, it's done that way because sometimes it's a cost-saving measure, because if you just have the same few characters and locations but a different thing to fight each week, then you don't have to draw new backgrounds, you don't have to spend as much time in the writing room. But I always feel like if they just reuse some of the character sheets and some of the designs to make a more consistent cast of heroes and villains, it would make for a lot more cohesive experience, even if they're not necessarily written consistently.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, we haven't really gotten into it yet, but there's more consistency than I expected in this show with recurring characters and whatnot.
I suppose
but yeah,
so.
They could have done better, certainly.
Episode 18, Blank-Headed Eagle. Scratch suffers a blow to the head and believes that he is his favorite television character, Edgar Eagle. Sonic uses this to his advantage in preventing another of Robotnik's schemes. So this is what I was talking about with the Coconuts episode, is that I can almost get into the idea of episodes that have characters other than Sonic and sometimes Tails as the protagonist, because this one almost stars Scratch. You know, the gorilla one was almost about Coconuts, but then they just abandon that. They don't actually get into who this guy is or how they're actually feeling about whatever predicament. And even at the end when Scratch gets fixed, it's like there's no actual... They don't take anything from this experience.
Yeah, well, like I said, for the most part, the plot is reset at the end of every episode. That's just the way it is. It's a shame.
And that's the thing that annoys me, is because you can have an episodic show, but still develop characters along these lines.
Yeah, I agree. It's just not what we're watching, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This one, you were able to see more in it than me. I didn't actually have many thoughts on this one. All I've got is just another great Robotnik line where Scratch is like, when he's in his other persona and he's coming to like stop one of Robotnik's inventions, and Sonic is helping Scratch, and Robotnik is like gonna shoot them with lasers, and Grounder's like, wait, but your grossness, you'll blow up Scratch too, and his reply is simply pity.
Yeah, that kind of... Yeah, he's like, oh, I don't care.
It's wonderful.
There's a couple things about Robotnik that I like in this episode. I like that he has an unwelcome mat.
Yes.
And I also like when they're like calling him over the phone, and he, you know, like they're talking to him at one point, but it's at a certain point he's just making gargling noises, just going. I
noticed that a few times. I kind of drop it later, but for the first few phone calls in the episode, when you're hearing the other end, the actor, usually Robotnik, is just going. It's pretty great.
Well, I like to think that it was just that he was just that angry that he was not speaking proper English.
Oh, yeah, that could be it too.
Episode 19, The Mystery of the Missing High Tops. During a fair in his honor, Sonic's shoes are stolen, and he and Tails must use detective intellect to try and solve the whodunit case. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't friction-free shoes just make it impossible to speed up?
Yes. The writers are trying to make it sound science-y, but it doesn't actually work, which is nothing new at all, but that's true. There isn't a whole lot of this, but this episode, on a few counts, looks into Sonic's past, interestingly. Because he's got those sneakers, which, where did those come from?
There's no Uncle Chuck in this show.
Explain it. Yeah, but I almost wondered if there'd be some sort of stand-in, but there wasn't. There is a friend from Sonic's past, though. Interestingly, who doesn't show up. Most of the characters that are somewhat significant show up at least once more, but not what's-his-face, the bunny dude. But it's interesting to see some of Sonic's past. And then the other main bit, the mystery. So this episode tries to be somewhat complex because it builds a mystery, but it fails, I think, because it's, at the end of the day, it's simple, but also the pieces aren't really there. It's not really like a well put together mystery. At least they tried, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a complete cop-out, that it's like, eh.
Yeah, it didn't come off super satisfying, in my opinion.
I will say the fangirl character who like nearly kills herself to get Sonic's attention. I really like that because during the brief period that I read Sonic fanfiction and fan comics, that was exactly how the ones that were like written by hardcore Sally fans would write Amy Rose.
Oh my gosh!
Just endlessly infatuated, no in between.
Right. Anyway, okay, so when Sonic loses their shoes and they lose their speed, they're like super depressed. They're like, without my speed, what can I do? And I'm here screaming at the screen. Your disguises are more overpowered than your speed. You don't need it.
Well, and it's like, seeing Sonic's feet in the episode aside, it's like, it's not, if we're saying that it's the lack of friction that has the shoes give you speed, then all that would mean is that when you run fast, it would just mean that it would really, really hurt, right?
That is exactly what happens. He can run fast, and he does a little bit, but it would like burn his feet if he did it.
Okay, it's been a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, the disguises are basically just an excuse in case the writers can't figure out how to get Sonic out of trouble.
Yeah, you're right. They're just a cop-out. More game elements thrown in. The beginning of the episode features robots that look kind of like buzz bombers, and then the newspapers confirm they actually are buzz bombers, although they don't look like buzz bombers all that much.
Yeah, they managed to do more than nothing.
Yeah, so that's notable in some regard.
Yeah, well, and it also is a nice, slightly overarching theme in old Sonic stuff, which is that every scene with Robotnik kind of opens on him abusing random robots, which you see a lot of in the old Archie comics as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
There's that one crab meat that just gets whacked about by him all the time.
Yep.
Episode 20, So Long Sucker. Tails adopts a squishy creature from another dimension named Goobster, who turns out to be a black hole. I want to highlight this episode for being our first crossover in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, because we have here the famous deuteragonist of the Kirby series, Gooey.
Right, totally. Yes, that's exactly what this is.
It's also funny that I say that, because Gooey's in, 3 games?
True, yeah, I know. Yeah, so Goopster, as they're called in this one, I thought it was really weird they take a liking to Sonic and Tails when in the first scene they appear in, they, abuse him a whole bunch, and then he's like, oh yeah, I'll be your friend. And then right afterwards, Tails is like, oh, I'm gonna dribble you like a ball, that's what friends do, and he can, you could tell that he's, getting dizzy. I'm like, what is this, dynamic?
This is a thing that you see in... It's a very specific and weird type of kids show episode where they find a new weird pet and they're just, horrible to it without realizing it. There's an episode of Adventure Time that does sort of the same thing, but that show is more self-aware with it because they have the mysterious new animal, explode partway through it and they're like, oh my god, we almost killed this thing, we have to get it back to his mother, and... but in this episode, it's just yeah, no, we'll just fuck around with this thing that we don't know what it is.
Yep. Because this show is so ridiculous, when Goopster initially eats a tree, I didn't blink twice. I was like, yeah, of course it ate a tree. And then later, when the other characters were surprised, I'm like, oh wait, you mean that was supposed to be unusual? That's just how over the top this show is.
You could see stuff like that and even, okay, I almost called Ed, Edd and Eddy down to earth, and that's not quite right, but that show is at least set in a real setting, but the fact that, I'm thinking about, oh yeah, there's that scene where Ed eats a slide because there was a rock in his shoe, it's okay. Yeah, it's just a normal thing for cartoons, and at a certain point it just becomes white noise.
Yep. There's some times when Robotnik is pretty stupid, but I was actually kind of impressed in this episode. He was actually fairly competent in this one. He was able to really take advantage of the situation and use Goopster to defeat Sonic and Tails, and the only reason that he lost is he was a little too hasty and just left as soon as Sonic and Tails were defeated instead of checking that he didn't proceed and then immediately spit them out. Yeah. But I don't know. Some of the plots are a little more, what am I saying? The stakes are a little more believable. It's not just we just make up an explanation. It felt a little more believable in this one. Aside from the fact that Sonic looks like he runs so fast he tears a hole in reality, and then this weird creature pops up. I mean, that's kind of wacky, but you don't know what I'm saying at this point. I enjoyed the episode a little bit more than most.
No, it's all right.
The last point is that apparently Robotnik had a pet named Mr. Bobo at some point. So add that to the list of facts about Robotnik's past.
Yeah. Now, sadly, this is actually the worst episode of any TV show ever created, because Sonic says that he's making a peanut butter jelly sandwich for the monster at one point, and that's definitely not a PBJ he made, because you can see lettuce on it.
Oh gosh, you're right.
So, again, 0 out of 10, sorry, but you guys have to be euthanized for creating a travesty of a show like this.
Oh well.
Episode 21, Sonic Gets Thrashed. When Robotnik opens up a resort to make the resident Mobians his slaves, Sonic enlists the help of some robots from an area of Mobius called Scrap Valley.
So, yeah, Robotnik trashes defective robots, but never bothers to trash Scratch and Grounder for some reason, as this episode reveals.
And weirdly, the robots that he trashed, Sonic ends up using to defeat him, which means that they must be better than Scratch and Grounder. So why did he trash them?
Well, as I sort of alluded to, robots in this show seem less like robots and more just like people. So I'd like to think they improved themselves. Probably Robotnik was holding them back, if anything.
And it is, kind of upsetting just how unsonic these robot designs are when I love Badnik so much. And I have to wonder, if this show had, a classic Sonic aesthetic about it, would I like this episode way more than I do? I think I might have.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of wacky world of chaos that sometimes has something vaguely Sonic related, and then there's also Sonic and Tails, although Sonic's personality is not quite, he's not quite himself, and then Robotnik is vaguely Eggman-like, but really their own character in this version. So yeah, I mean, the whole show is just sort of Sonic, but not really if you look at it more than...
Sonic in this show is Bugs Bunny, is what it is. And
Yeah,
Sonic
yeah.
is already kind of Bugs Bunny, which is why it's not too big a change. But they're not writing, the same Sonic that we're used to nowadays.
Yeah, the only bit that makes it seem a little more believable is the fact that, as we get there, Sonic is voiced by the same person who voices him in Saddam and Underground, where he's very much more Sonic, even though both those shows are... They're their own thing still, but they fit more with the greater universe, I think. But about this episode, it's called Sonic Gets Thrashed, but why isn't it called Sonic Gets Trashed? Did they make a typo?
I don't know.
That would have fit a lot better, I'm just saying. Okay, so you already pointed out contradictions in the show. This was where I noticed the first one, though. When Sonic disguises himself as a pizza delivery person and they deliver pizza, Grounder points out that they're robots and they don't eat. But I literally mentioned in slow going where they're eating sausages. Yeah.
This is also the episode with the became dictator of the nursery line. So maybe just this episode itself is the continuity mistake and everything else is fine.
Oh, you're right. Okay, well, 0 out of 10. We're gotta erase this episode too.
I don't know if this is too doomer to mention, but it's very just quaint to see a whole recycle to save the earth PSA, in this show from 1993. It's sure wish that worked.
Well, let's not get into that.
Episode 22, Pseudo-Sonic. Robotnik creates a robot Sonic suit with the intent of ruining the Hedgehog's reputation. He forces a lab rat named Lawrence to pilot by threatening his parents. So, this is really weird because I didn't know about this episode before I watched the show, but I knew about the Archie Comics version of this story, which it's really similar to. It even includes Sonic having an allergic swelling reaction and Pseudo-Sonic going on a rampage. The difference is that in this episode, Pseudo-Sonic is a mech suit that just anybody can pilot.
Yeah, what the heck is up with that? I was so confused. There are lots of autonomous badniks in this show. Why did they decide Pseudo-Sonic has to be piloted? Both in-universe and out-of-universe. In-universe doesn't make any sense. Why did the writers decide to make a robot like this?
So they can have stakes for the episode, I guess?
I suppose, yeah.
I guess. It's just weird that I think this is the only time they do that. Yeah.
As far as I remember, yeah, it's even weirder because in the Archie Comics version, Pseudo-Sonic is an autonomous robot with its own AI, and this episode aired 2 weeks before Sonic CD came out, which has an autonomous Sonic robot with its own AI.
That's interesting.
I guess now that they think about it, this is a little more in line with the games because that means that the robot is actually powered by an animal.
It's true.
I suppose so, yeah. Okay, but that also pisses me off because, later on in the episode, Tails jumps in the mech and starts controlling it, but inside it, he's so much smaller.
Yes, is Pseudo-Sonic a TARDIS?
I was so confused by the scale in this show, both with Pseudo-Sonic, and then also the fact that at one part, Tails just casually flies between the bars of a cage, which... Okay, yeah, in cartoons, it looks like you could fit between bars, but you assume that the bars are tighter than they actually look. But in that instance, no, they're not. Huh?
Why didn't they do that when Sonic and Tails were in the mole guy's cage in the Underground episode?
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing they don't ever do in another episode. So that really throws a wrench in my whole collection of lore that I'm gathering up. But one interesting thing that I did notice was, so Sonic is wanted in this episode But when they're showing Sonic on like the television, there's a picture of him holding up a prisoner number, which implies that he was imprisoned before.
I mean,
That is weird.
maybe he got arrested for speeding.
Oh yeah, that
That's a
does
later
come
episode.
up actually.
Oh,
That's one of the ones you didn't watch, but don't worry about it.
Maybe the episodes are out of order. Oh yeah, I really like that sometimes the show is self-aware, because you would think that, oh yeah, Pseudo-Sonic, they're fast. That's what they copy. That's the whole point. But no, in this show, they realize that it's become a defining character trait that Sonic has used disguises, so Pseudo-Sonic uses disguises.
I guess that's one way to turn your extremely lazy plot solution into a strength.
Suppose so.
And that's the end of part 2 of this retrospective. Feel free to comment, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can always reach us at deepdivezonepod@gmail.com or at deepdivezone on Twitter. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.